What's up, everybody? I feel so weird greeting everybody every week. I don't know why. It always comes off as canned and corny. I don't know. B-Show Brian, Wrestling Reanimated. First week of June 2020. Hang on. Battletoads. That is a metal cover of Battletoads by Gnom, G-N-O-M, on YouTube. Looks like they're from Poland or Russia. Like that, I can't read anything they have typed on their comments or descriptions, so. Hang on a second, here we go. A little bit more. A little bit more. The reason I'm doing Battletoads this week is because I know that I'm going to be fighting an uphill battle. This week, I'm taking a look at something that was brought up. It's been brought up several times, but really since the Revival left WWE and joined up with AEW as, what, FTR? It was, what, after the Revival? Now I don't even know what it stands for. But before we get into Jim Cornette in AEW, I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag now. Just want to say welcome to this week. Wrestling Reanimated. I've been having some fun doing these, so we're going to keep on going. Sometimes they're going to be modern. The last couple episodes have been modern. Before that, we did a few episodes that were old school. You know, Ultimate Warrior and Dusty Rhodes and all sorts of stuff. At least I think we did some Dusty Rhodes. Either way, that's going to be a theme of this show. We're going to talk about the what-ifs of wrestling. We're going to talk about matches that never happened. We're going to talk about these insane scenarios. Some that seem impossible, like Jim Cornette in AEW. So before that, I just want to do the obligatory. You can check me out on Instagram and Twitter at bshowbrian. See, I want to get into this. I really want to get into it so much. I don't even want to do like the plugging of the social media and stuff like that. Because to me, this is really interesting. But you can find the show on Facebook at Wrestling Reanimated. Pretty simple. You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at bshowbrian. If you have any thoughts, if you agree, disagree, hate mail, or if you have any ideas for any topics yourself, or a spin on anything, or your own ideas, I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to share them. At bshowbrian@gmail.com. It's bshowbrian@gmail.com. See, I got so used to using like the ampersand, the @ sign, for social media anymore that I always just include it when I talk about, like, even my email. It's bizarre. So, bshowbrian@gmail.com. All right, now that we got all that out of the way, we're going to talk this week about a scenario that many people don't even think could ever happen. It's not possible, right? Jim Cornette in AEW. Now, this is going to sound like a surprise to some people who followed me on social media over the past 18 months, probably since the launch of AEW. I like AEW. I think out of all of the wrestling on TV every week, AEW, for better or worse, tends to be the top TV show in wrestling. Now, I also think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's a very low bar set with WWE programming right now. So it's not to me like it's such a hard hurdle to jump. With the crap that WWE's been putting on, the bar's been lowered quite a bit, but it still, with everything going on, I find myself looking forward to AEW more than most of the other shows. I may like the Riddle Thatcher cage match, the cage fight. I liked that more than anything I watched last Wednesday. But as far as complete show, I don't think there's any one show I watch for a longer period of time and enjoy more of it, more well-rounded, I should say, the show, than AEW Dynamite. I really do. And in fact, last week I talked about the TNT Championship, which was unveiled by Cody, or by Mike Tyson, I should say. So the past couple weeks have been AEW centric, and I am a fan of AEW. But one thing that was posed in, I believe, the AEW Facebook page was if Jim Cornette should come back and manage the former Revival. And there was a pretty mixed response there. You know, a lot of people were, yes, that'd be a great idea, and for obvious reasons. The guy has history in the business. The guy has knowledge and could help out. But also, we know his history. He's been let go from a lot of companies for a lot of different reasons. Most notably the NWA for making a dated joke that a lot of people took the wrong way because they were looking for some sort of reason. And if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I probably would have agreed that no, Jim Cornette would never fit in AEW. But then again, as all this Black Lives Matter stuff is happening, as the protests are happening and social awareness is rising, Le Champion responded in a very undiplomatic manner. People were posting Black Lives Matter. He was responding All Lives Matter. Then people were trying to respond to him and explain why that was kind of a dumb thing to respond with. And he started blocking people. And let's not forget, and again, I like AEW, but we got to call it how it is. This is about honesty. Above all else, you know, I hope to be entertaining on this show. I hope to put forth ideas that either you would want to see or would at least be interesting to see in wrestling, or an interesting take if it is a more commentary-based episode as opposed to just a fantasy booking scenario. But let's keep it honest above all else. AEW was funded by the cons, right? So their bankroll... Ooh. Man, my table's... There we go. Now we're situated. I thought my whole desk setup was going to collapse on me. Where was I? So the guys that bankrolled AEW donate to the Trump campaign. So let's not forget that. They're right wingers. They're conservatives. And then you take the Bucks and Cody, and even the Bucks' dad, they're all birthers. They're Trump-supporting birthers. So if you're talking about, you know, and Tony Khan today, I don't want to talk. I'm not a news type of guy. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not trying to be your ESPN sports radio version of, you know, a wrestling commentator. If you want that, go find Don Tony and Kevin Castle. They're great at it. Jason Solomon from the Solomonster Sounds Off podcast. He is awesome at it. And of course, Wrestling Soup, which those are my guys. They're pretty much the Opie and Anthony of the wrestling world. Sorry, coffee refuel after a long day. If you want that type of commentary, go there, and the news and stuff like that. There's a lot of other outlets. This is mostly for fun, so I want to get the more serious stuff out of the way. But let's be honest with what it is. Fans uphold AEW like it's this progressive company and it's all benevolent. And it's all because it's the right thing to do. As if it wasn't because it's a marketing ploy in some way. Like, really, that's what it's about. It was the same issue I had with Ghostbusters. I was talking to a friend of mine when the female Ghostbusters came out. And he was like, oh, you're just against it because you're sexist. And I'm like, no. I don't like the whole... I don't like using something to exploit a certain population of people to extract money from their pockets. Does that make sense? That's why I didn't like it. So like this whole, the women's empowerment movement and all that stuff. Dude, my favorite movie's Halloween. Pretty much popularized the final girl. Okay? I have no problem whatsoever with female-led casts. You know, Ripley was awesome in Alien. I love Sarah Connor in Terminator. And no problem with it whatsoever. It had zero to do with that. It's just that, number one, I didn't think it was that good a movie. And number two, it's been blatant what this whole thing has been about. So let's call it what it is. AEW is going after people who see themselves as progressive. They're going after the social justice warrior, if you want to call it that. They're going after the cancel culture fans, the people that are very active online. And they've done a great job of courting a lot of those people. But the issue is, as more of this stuff comes to light, as people dig up old tweets, as Jericho keeps opening his mouth, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. My buddy John Draper from The Soup says all the time, play woke games, get woke prizes. It's just the way it is. So if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, before a lot of this stuff was brought up, before Jericho made his comments about All Lives Matter, I would have said no way on Jim Cornette in AEW. But I think, you know, if you're going to bring Cornette in, and you can, and please, if you're a hardcore AEW fan and you hate Jim Cornette, just please give this a chance. I'm not saying you have to love it, but just give it a chance and hear me out, okay? Just be open-minded. I know there's been a lot of AEW fans who've given AEW as a fan base, AEW fans have gotten a rap because of a lot of the more vigilant fans as being closed-minded. So just be open-minded for a minute, okay? Prove me wrong. And if you disagree, email me and I'll share. And that's fine. But point being, have him sign a good boy clause. Right? If you're worried about what Cornette's going to say. And let's really think about what was so terrible that he has said, other than things that were taken out of context by people who already had an axe to grind. The thing about Sonny Kiss, called him an exotico because that's what like the cross-dressing wrestlers are called in Mexico. Okay. I mean, yeah, he said some things that are sexist. Yeah, he said some things that are racially insensitive. But is it any worse than the Jericho All Lives Matter stuff? I don't think so. Is it as bad as Cody and the Bucks being birthers? I don't think so. And trying to pass themselves off as woke progressives? No. So I say give him a shot, okay? Give Cornette a shot. Make him sign a good boy clause that says, hey, we're going to bring you in. You're not going to step out of line. If you do, the second you do, we reserve the right to terminate you. And again, I don't think he would go for this unless they really made it worthwhile. But in that sense, make him sign a good boy clause. WWE had, approached Scott Hall about that back in 2002 or 2003, whatever year it was. I think it was 2002 when they first were talking to him. And he had drug and alcohol problems. They said, hey, sign a good boy clause. We can terminate your contract for if you violate it for these reasons, specific reasons. That way it makes the company look good. And what you can also do is, instead of being divisive like everyone's being right now, you could have two parties come together. Jim Cornette, who's a noted magnet of heat in the wrestling business, and AEW, this fresh progressive company. And they could come out and say, look, not everyone's a fan of Jim Cornette and his opinions politically. And Jim Cornette isn't always a fan of things that are done here in AEW. But here we are, two sides coming together for the purpose of what's best for the fans. So at a time when everyone's being divisive and cloistering themselves away in their bubbles and creating their own echo chambers, this could be a show of good faith on both sides. Like, hey, we're going to come together. Right? Cornette's going to try not to ruffle too many feathers. and we're gonna show the world that he's not a terrible guy. I don't think they would do that, and I really don't think that's necessary. I'm just saying, do you want to go that route, protect yourself, do the good boy clause. It's been done before. I think it's pretty sad that I think it's sad that that's how much wrestling has changed. Where guys used to have to sign good boy clauses because they partied too much, or they got drunk, or they did drugs, and they pretty much were rock stars. So they had to sign a good boy clause that they weren't going to smash a hotel room or do anything anything that was going to impair them and stop them from upholding their terms of their contract, essentially, or anything that makes the company look bad. Now it's like, don't say things that people are going to take out of context on Twitter. That's where we're at. But either way, let's get back to the wrestling here. So, good boy clause, no good boy clause doesn't matter. Jim Cornette would be, and I said this on Facebook and it got a mixed response. More positive than I thought, but got a mixed response. Jim Cornette could be both the most hated heel and eventually the biggest babyface in AEW. I said that right. I didn't misspeak. Jim Cornette, this is the obvious one, could be the biggest heel in AEW. Eventually, he could also be the biggest babyface. And it's not that complicated either. It's just classic wrestling psychology. And again, I'm not here saying that you shouldn't do spot stuff and that old school psychology. I'm not saying that Cornette's way is the only way. I'm not saying that they should get rid of the things that brought them to the dance. One of the things I liked about AEW, for better or worse, they stuck mostly with what brought them to the dance. What put them on the map was the Elite, was the Bucks, was Omega, was Cody, was the style, was the hardcore fans of the work rate stuff, which we're seeing every week. And the one thing everyone complained about TNA was that when TNA went to Spike TV, they abandoned or ignored everything that made them unique and instead tried to be WWE light. Now, I keep wanting to call them Impact. Now AEW goes to TNT. They're averaging 600,000 to 800,000 fans a week, depending on the week. They were starting to build some momentum back up again. But there was a pretty strong hardcore fan base. And AEW didn't deviate from what brought them to the dance. They delivered exactly what their core audience was expecting. And they're trying to draw people in with that. Unfortunately, it wasn't working. They had their base. Numbers started to fall off a little bit. They, again, stayed around 6 to 7, 800,000. Sometimes 9. COVID didn't help. But I have said, I give them kudos for that, because any other company has and would have abandoned ship that abandoned what brought them to the dance and tried to be WWE. They have not done that. At least for the most part. Now, over the past couple weeks, they've had no choice but to integrate bigger guys, a different style, more psychology. But they're still far and away doing AEW stuff. They're doing the Elite stuff. They're doing the work rate stuff. They're just fine-tuning, and I think that's all they ever needed. I'm not a Jim Cornette acolyte that you should go back to the style of the 60s and the 70s. The cat's out of the bag. You can't do that. The business is different. For better or worse, it's different. So you gotta go with something new. But that doesn't mean you can't incorporate classic wrestling psychology into it to fine-tune the presentation to make it more palatable for not only your core audience, because let's face it, if you're doing the high spot stuff every week and it's just matches and matches and matches and nothing makes sense and nothing happens, nothing happens. If nothing makes sense and there's no rhyme or reason to what happens, then it's like having Christmas every day. You have Christmas once a year. Or Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever. But it's a once-a-year thing. And you have other little holidays here and there. You have your birthday. Maybe you have Easter, where you hunt for eggs and open your Easter baskets. But Christmas is really a big deal in this country. Once a year, you anticipate. We start planning for Christmas in fucking August, for Christ's sake. We don't even have Thanksgiving anymore. Thanksgiving doesn't really exist. Thanksgiving was an excuse, for the past couple of years, has been an excuse for my family to get together and start making Christmas lists for all the kids with the Thanksgiving catalogs and ads that come out. I mean, that's what it's been. Have a big dinner, guys watch football, women look through the magazines and the catalogs and start planning for Christmas. But if we look at Christmas, it's the anticipation. It's not just the fact that you get a whole bunch of shit. It's the anticipation, the memories from the previous years. You're thinking about them. You're dreaming about what's going to happen. And I'm talking about from a kid's standpoint, right? But what's going to happen, the anticipation, even when, going to bed and waiting for Santa to come and you're going to wake up the next morning from the whole thing, movies, right? Classic movies, anticipation, suspense, tension. That's what makes the payoff so grand. And I don't think you have to abandon what makes AEW different and new to incorporate that. I think they've been doing a good job with Jake and with Archer, and I think they could do a good job of that with Jim Cornette. And I think it's obvious. You bring Jim Cornette in, yeah, maybe he manages the revival, right? Let me look at what's the AEW roster these days. We're going to do this in real time, folks. AEW.com is not even owned by All Elite Wrestling. Oh my God. AEW Global Real Estate Investments. Oh, come on, guys. What's the website then? AEW Wrestling. AllEliteWrestling.com. Okay. Here we go. Now, everyone talks about the revival or FTR. Let's look at who else. I think if you come in and you have Cornette feud with, maybe he wouldn't work with Omega, but I think there's too much money there not to. But I think if you had Jim Cornette versus that power structure that represents AEW, and it's been kind of a boys' club for too long. I think the Elite is outrun its course in some ways. Cody's doing his own thing. You just had the big 8-man stadium brawl. You can still do more stuff with that. And I mentioned the TNT title last week with maybe Adam Page, him taking that and kind of making that like a Hard Knocks throwback to the old days. You could do that with Cornette. Have Cornette pick someone that represents that same attitude and have him commandeer the TNT title and do that. Maybe Adam Page turns heel and goes with Cornette when he comes in. Because maybe he's sick of Kenny Omega's shit and that's where that feud goes. Who knows? But there's a number of guys that other than the revival, you could still put Cornette with. Let's see. Because there's a lot of guys that are great in the ring, but they aren't the greatest talkers or characters. Dustin Rhodes could be one of them. Dustin turning on Cody. But I don't think they're going to do that. Kazarian could be one, but I don't think he would do that. Let's see. Moxley, nah, I don't see that working. Archer, maybe if he didn't have Jake. Luther would be a great one. Because even though Cornette hates hardcore wrestling, I don't think he would mind just a big, scary, freaky-looking dude to be his backup or to be his hitman. I could see MJF if Cornette wasn't such a big, or if MJF wasn't such a big personality himself. Pac, I don't know about that. Pentagon, maybe. Maybe. Guevara, no, he's good where he is. Sean Spears, no. Maybe Scorpio Sky eventually when he breaks out on his own. Butcher and Blade, I don't know. Wardlow, I don't know. I'd probably say Revival, maybe Adam Page, because he seems like that throwback to the Southern wrestling anyway. Maybe Dustin Rhodes. So, like, if you were putting together a stable, Adam Page, let's call it Adam Page, the Revival, or FTR. Dustin Rhodes as kind of your veteran advisor. And maybe you add in, who else did I say there? Luther? Yeah. So Luther is, and I'm a huge fan of special teams, and younger fans or people who aren't football fans, special teams like punting, field goal team, kick return, those are the groups that they aren't playing the regular game, but they're doing like the kicking, the crew that kicks the extra point, the crew that catches the football on the kickoff. That's special teams. And in wrestling, special teams are valet, managers, drive-bys, extras, people like that. And I'm a huge fan of special teams. Back in the old days of ECW, 911, Paul Heyman's bodyguard, his whole thing would be when there was something that wasn't going right in the ring, 911's music would hit, he'd come out, he'd choke slam someone, and take him out of the ring. That's all he did. And then you use that. I think they did it with Taz. Taz was this unstoppable champion, and no one could beat him, and he was choking people out. So after years of 911 having the chokeslam drive-by gimmick, guess what happens? 911 comes out to take on Taz, and now it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen? You got Taz, and you got 911. Who's going to win? So special teams can be great that way. So you could have a Luther, and he could be a bodyguard of Cornette, or just a crazy dude that Cornette sicks on people. He doesn't. That's a good thing too. A guy like Luther doesn't have to win because he's nuts and he's not going after titles. He could be your hitman. That, let's say you had a Hangman Page versus Kenny Omega feud over the TNT title, and Jim Cornette was leading Page because he was the TNT champion and the throwback and all that stuff. So maybe Cornette would sick Luther after Omega, and Omega's trying to beat Luther, but the disconnect is Luther's not trying to win, he's just trying to hurt Omega. His payoff isn't money, it's not the fame, it's not success, it's not wins, it's not titles. It's getting paid to go in there and beat the shit out of somebody. What's the line from Fight Club? I just wanted to destroy something beautiful, right? Luther would be nuts. So send it. And I'm not even that familiar with Luther's work other than just little stuff here and there. But again, special teams. He doesn't have to go out there and have the 5-star Meltzer match. See, that's where following that ideology of the 5-star match, of the best match on the card, that's where it gets lost. That's where you get lost following that, excuse me. Luther going out there, to me, wouldn't be, oh, they're going to go tear the house down and have a 5-star match. It would be, here's this dangerous freak who's going out there to kill Omega. It's the story of it. Omega can do all the flips and stuff he wants. Luther's not trying to win. It doesn't have to be a 5-star match if you build up the character the right way. And then if you're a fan of Kenny Omega and you want to see him have a great match and beat Adam Page, well, now if Luther has screwed up his knee or whatever, you can tell that story. But you don't have to be so tunnel visioned on Cornette versus Omega just because they have the history, or Cornette versus the Bucks. That's the easy stuff. Looking up and down this roster, I can see if Cornette was going to come in and manage FTR, I could see him going after Angelico and Jack Evans. Great tag team. Haven't had much exposure on AEW, but still kind of embody that style that in character Cornette could send the no flips, just fist guys after. He could also go after Jericho because of public comments that have been made. Maybe Jericho's the AEW champion again. Maybe his charge, if it's Dustin or Adam Page or whoever, is the TNT champion. Maybe Cornette's doing promos like this is the one champion that this company can truly get behind. And maybe Jericho turns babyface eventually. I don't see that happening anytime soon anyway. He could go after Colt Cabana. Colt Cabana's been the comedy guy. Darby Allin. I was thinking about that last week. To me, Darby Allin versus a guy like Luther, that is a third match from the top, second match from the top, attraction type of match for whatever their big pay-per-view would be every year, whether it's Double or Nothing or All In or whatever you want to call it. If you build a guy like Luther as this crazy monster, and he's kind of like their freaky dark side guy, so him and Darby in a casket match, or a buried alive match, or something crazy, would be really interesting to see. And not just from a match standpoint, because it would be crazy, but a character standpoint too. And if you have Cornette with a guy like Luther or a guy like Dustin, let's say Dustin sells out and goes with Cornette and goes against the family. So now you've got Dustin versus Darby, Dustin versus Cody again, under different circumstances. Or a Dr. Luther versus Cabana. Let's see, who else? Private Party? I think, yeah, you could do that, Private Party. Jimmy Havoc, yeah, even though Jimmy Havoc's not a babyface. Joey Janela. That's the one I was looking for. And again, if you have Cornette managing a single like an Adam Page, then having a serious wrestler like Adam Page, he could still have those great matches with Joey Janela that AEW is known for, the back and forth, 5-star, blah, blah, blah. But it also makes sense in a storyline purpose because Cornette is putting his serious wrestler against this guy that he's been knocking for the past 18 months. And Janela can come out. And it would be, and this is why I said he would be the biggest heel in wrestling. And then the biggest babyface. I'll get to that in a minute. Everything Cornette would come out and say against guys that he would naturally wrestle or naturally feud with, whether it's Moxley because you could say you were dumb to leave the job in New York and the guaranteed money to come down here, and yeah, you're making good money, but now you're carving yourself up like a Christmas ham, and it's not guaranteed or whatever the case to last forever. But Moxley, Cody, he hasn't really talked shit about Cody, so that could be a wild card. I'm gonna hold on to that one. But again, Angelico and Jack Evans, the high-flying stuff, he could take issue with. He could take issue, as I mentioned, with Darby Allin because of the hardcore stuff or the high-flying. Colt Cabana because of the goofiness. Private Party because of the high-flying nature. Joey Janela, he's been knocking him for 18 months. Jungle Boy, he's kind of praised. Let's see. Yeah, Luther as a charge. Matt Hardy. And again, that's another one where maybe he had respect for the guy and now he doesn't. Because you're making a fool out of yourself. And then you could have a crazy dude like Luther go to the Hardy compound. And so now maybe you've got Luther and, bring some other people in. There's other people out there doing crazy gimmicks. I think it would make sense if you brought more people in for Cornette to manage. Because right now he has an issue with the company as a whole. So it would make sense for him to bring talent in. Of course, Marco Stunt. And that would be another fun one too. And here's another reason why following the Dave Meltzer 5-star dogma can lead you astray. Jim Cornette is an older guy, so he's not going to be able to do what he did with Paul Heyman in 1986. But he has been knocking Marco Stunt so much that it would make sense in this situation to do, let's call it, again, I hate to keep using Luther because he's such a lower tier person right now, but let's grab someone else. Maybe Scorpio Sky breaks away. Who else did I say? Luther, Kip Sabian, no. Okay, so maybe it is Hangman Page. So maybe he goes with Page. And maybe Page feuds with Luchasaurus. And in the middle of it, he's obviously going to crack on Marco Stunt. It would make perfect sense to have the classic match where if you do the mixed tags, Jim Cornette and Adam Page versus Luchasaurus and Marco Stunt. Or if Luchasaurus wins, Marco Stunt gets 5 minutes with Jim Cornette. Or just Marco Stunt versus Cornette, and I mean, you're not going to do that. Marco's not going to be able to do the high-flying stuff with Cornette, but I think he would get over much more as a character, add another dimension to his character, even though I can't stand Marco Stunt. And do the bullshit where Marco Stunt's excited because Luchasaurus just beat Adam Page, so he's going to get 5 minutes, or he has a match with Jim Cornette now. And Cornette does the thing where Marco Stunt gets attacked. And he hurts his knee, so he can't do all the high-flying stuff. Or Cornette throw powder in his eyes, do the classic old-school shit. Maybe Cornette throws powder in his eye before the match starts, but Marco Stunt, he wants this match. He's not going to get this opportunity. He wants to shut him up because of the stuff he said. This crotchety old man has said. So then that's why you could do the stuff where he can't hit his big moves because he can't see. And then finally, when he does go to hit the big move, he still can't see and his depth perception's off, so he misses Cornette. Or, it's a no DQ match, except no interference, or it's in the cage, right? Where in this case, Jungle Boy or Luchasaurus beats, what's his name? Whoever Cornette's charge is, Adam Cole or Adam Page, maybe. And then Marco gets time in the cage with Cornette as opposed to just a regular match, so it'd make more sense. Maybe Cornette sneaks the racket in. So maybe it's only like a 5 or 6 minute match, but it's mostly heat because Cornette's cheating and he uses the racket, and that's how you get around it. He's not doing athletic stuff. He's not even really trying to fight, but it would be much more believable to see a guy the size of Marco Stunt trying to fight a 60-year-old man. 50-year-old man, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to date Jim Cornette a little bit. But that would make sense. And see, I haven't even talked about the Bucks because to me that's so surface level and obvious. But the Cornette mini match with Marco Stunt, taking a killer like Luther and using him to do your dirty work. Taking the former Revival and having matches with Angelico and Jack Evans and Private Party and Kazarian and what's his name? Goddamn, Scorpio Sky, and there's just so much else you could still do. Him and Chuck Taylor. That was another one. Send him after, and this would make, again, sense just from the former Revival, FTR. He's knocked Chuck Taylor for years for doing goofy shit. So that would make sense there. To me, that's about it so far, unless they bring other guys in for the heel stuff. And here's where it gets interesting. I mentioned that Jim Cornette could be the biggest heel and the biggest babyface. Once you've established Cornette and maybe the Revival, I'm going to keep calling them the Revival because I don't remember what FTR stands for. But if you take his tag team, right? And if you book them as killers over, I don't know, a year, 18 months, whatever the case may be, you book them as killers and they're killing everybody. They're a serious tag team and they're grounding all the high flyers. So if you take those guys and now all of a sudden a new heel group shows up. Maybe Luke Harper finally gets his shit together and Evil Uno comes back. Oh, God, I can't stand him. But maybe the Dark Order steps up and really starts laying waste to people. Or maybe Jake brings another act in, and him and Archer, and they're dominating, and they've got a stranglehold on the title and on the company, and it's almost like a terrorist situation in a way where they've got the strength because they're so dominant. And maybe you've got the Bucks, or you've got Cody, or you've got Omega, or whoever. And this is after just 18 months of the Revival kicking everybody's ass. Being the serious old school ground and pound team. But now there's this other big badass group that is taking over and throwing their weight around. If you do the classic, again, old school angle where the baby faces like the Bucks or Omega's getting beaten down and no one has been able to help them out and they're waiting for someone to come help, and all of a sudden the Revival's music plays, and Cornette comes down, right? They come in, they turn the tide. Reluctantly, they join forces. Now they turn babyface. If you give Jim Cornette and the Revival 18 months, and you book him strong, and you let Cornette promo, like he can, I guarantee you, if he comes out and turns heel and does his, God damn it. Oh, who am I? Let's see. Who am I talking about? Lance Archer? Goddamn Lance Archer, you're big and you're strong, but you ain't got no goddamn heart. And that's what these guys have. That's what we showed over 18 months. We are the real deal. We're the realest thing in AEW, and that's what this company needs right now. That's why we came out here. You're destroying everything we worked to build. Blah, 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 blah. If anything, the people knew we were real and we were doing what we said we were going to do. God damn. Did I forget the cough? But I guarantee you, I was in, was it Cleveland or Dayton? Dayton, Ohio. I was in Dayton, Ohio, 2005, late 05, early 06, when the CZW wrestlers jumped the rail and beat up Ace Steel in the locker room, emptied, and Cornette came out with his teeth missing and bloody, and he cut this, and you could tell it was a promo. And I love BJ Whitmer, but you blew it. I was hook, line, and sinker for a minute. And then I saw BJ Whitmer mouthing the promo, and I'm like, oh. So Cornette's like, these goddamn CZW hardcore wrestlers. They come in here because they got their jobs mobbing at the peep show, blah, blah, blah. Son of a bitch. And as Cornette's delivering his promo, BJ Whitmer's sitting on the apron, like, mouthing it. I'm like, oh, no. I was believing it for just a second. You fucked it up. But anyway, Cornette, if anything, he can cut a hell of a promo. And again, if over 18 months, if you sell those guys as the real deal, who better to help out a guy like Omega or a team like the Bucks than the real deal? Because if you've got a heel like Archer, right? And who else is a big badass? Let's say you've got Archer, Brian Cage, Brody Lee. Oh, let's see. That's 3. And let's add one more here, shall we? Who's another? Maybe a Jake Hager. It's a pretty big foursome. Yeah. Stick with those 4. And then you've got Omega and someone else. Who the fuck cares? But it's guys who traditionally have great matches, but they aren't known for being those rugged, hard-hitting, tough guys. And then you bring in the 2 guys you've been selling as the toughest, and at the same time you have Cornette come out and cut the babyface promo to turn them. I guarantee you they would be over as babyfaces in an instant. And then from there, he can drop the whole, he can still say they're about being serious, and he can jokingly knock the clown show shit without, insulting. And he can even still insult the baby faces, but at least, hopefully, the people respect him in some way. But then you can transition to where maybe if his guys are baby faces now he can face Brody Lee. And imagine Jim Cornette cutting promos on essentially calling those guys a bunch of incels, right? Blistering those guys. Because let's be honest, Brody Lee and the whole Dark Order has really been underwhelming. Imagine Jim Cornette just taking the piss out of him. Goddamn, you're 6'10", you're a scary looking dude. But you come out playing with yourself every week. Figure out who you are, goddamn. I can't do him justice, but essentially poking fun at guys like Evil Uno. Come on. Goddamn, you look like you just stole Pee-wee's bike. Yes, that's a 1980s reference. I'm dating myself here. But, yeah, so Evil Uno, who else? Jimmy Havoc. Now he can cut on Joey Janela. Originally, when he was a heel, he was making fun of Janela. Now if he's a babyface, he can do the same thing with Jimmy Havoc. Except, make fun of Jimmy Havoc because he's the least intimidating looking wrestler on their roster. And then I could see this. If he turns babyface, maybe there's someone who doesn't turn with him. So he loses a client, but maybe he picks up Jungle Boy. And maybe this is what allows Jungle Boy to break off. So maybe Luchasaurus goes single or on his own. Or maybe he turns heel and drops the mask and gets a ton of heat. So now he's going off on his own to be a top-level heel. And now Jungle Boy needs some guidance because he's good. And Cornette's been very, very complimentary of Jungle Boy over the past, 6 or 8 months. So to me, that would make perfect sense. And in this way, now it's less of an army against AEW, and he's done his thing. He's made his stand. Now he's a part of AEW, and he's helping the next generation along. So now you've got, maybe he manages Jungle Boy. Looking around the roster, it's somebody else. And could you imagine a war of words between MJF and Jim Cornette? That one you'd probably split the audience a little bit because there's probably going to be a lot of people that would still cheer MJF over Cornette, but Cornette can hold his own. As far, on the mic anyway. Cornette, Orange Cassidy, they could do a similar thing too if Cornette was a heel, where him and Cassidy have, you could see Cornette, and it could be funny too, where, and I think this is comedy that Cornette would even maybe approve of or agree to. You could have Cornette with his tennis racket and punching, taking swings at Orange Cassidy, and Cassidy just ducking him. Where, and that's the whole, it's meta. That's the whole joke is, he doesn't take anything seriously, and here's Cornette, and he's going after him, and he can't make anything happen, and then all of a sudden Cassidy busts something out and wins. That could be, again, just a mini match type of thing. Or Jesus, Cornette Cornette managing Pentagon and Phoenix, being their American spokesperson, kind of the flip side to what he did with Yokozuna. Oh man, and it's funny because like I've seen Jim Cornette at his babyface best and his heelish best, and I was having fun thinking of all the baby faces that he could verbally eviscerate. Sammy Guevara is another one, as far as a heel that he can eviscerate now. I think that's about it. I mean, obviously they're going to be bringing new people in and out of the company, but I don't know. I think Cornette in AEW, if I can take a step back here, not to beat a dead horse, but the guy is very talented. And if they could make the situation right to bring him in, get all of that heat out of their system, and then once that's happened and they've solidified whoever his clients are, there's a really great opportunity to turn him and those guys babyface. I think Jim Cornette is at his best a heel. He's a natural heel, obviously. But I do also think that managing a young guy like Jungle Boy could be a great fit for Jim Cornette in AEW. Or even Darby. Could you imagine if you managed Darby and put them together, and it's this like odd couple pairing where they usually do that with tag teams, where Jim Cornette manages Darby, and it's like an old cranky dad in New Balance tennis shoes, telling his son not to skateboard and not to do all this crazy stuff. I mean, seriously, there's so many different avenues for that. Odd couple pairings and heel and babyface, and the promos would be real and the feuds are real because it's really been the realest thing in wrestling over the past 5 years. And I mentioned Moxley. Could you imagine Cornette coming in, excuse me, and working with Moxley? He could even manage Moxley. I'm not saying he needs it. Or go toe-to-toe with Cody. I lost all respect for you and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe he gained a measure of respect. But as the one guy, and that's what I was going to mention. Maybe he turns Dustin against Cody. And he says one Rhodes understood the tradition of the American dream. And the other one bought himself a wrestling company. I mean, there's so much you could do with him. And I understand not wanting to employ people who are going to say and do nasty shit because it's hateful and whatever. But I really don't think anything he's said has been that bad. I think it's really been people who had an axe to grind against him, for the most part, looking for something to pin on him. So, and he's been a scapegoat. But I think, especially as things have become divisive, it would be a decent opportunity to bring things together and show that, the business is about a business. It's not about, like someone tweeted, who I don't even know who it was, Canadian Wrestling Experience, was like, so how do we feel about the wrestlers we love not speaking out on these political matters? And to me, I come from a different era, man. And maybe it's age, maybe it's generational, but like, for the most part, unless it's really egregious, I could give a fuck less. Chris Benoit did terrible things. I can still watch his matches and enjoy them for what they are. Yes, in the back of my mind, I know he did some terrible shit. And I hope he burns, or at least if it was medical and he can't help it, then, I don't know how to answer that, but it's terrible, terrible shit that you can never condone. I can still watch his matches. They were great matches. O.J. Simpson is one of the best football players of all time. He's a Hall of Famer, whether or not they give him the Hall of Fame status or take it away. He did some heinous shit. Okay, and there's another thing. Mike Tyson, okay? Let's go back. Once again, AEW. If you're listening to this still and you're saying, no, because he said some really terrible shit. Mike Tyson just made 2 high-profile appearances, and he's probably going to make more. He's a convicted rapist. Not alleged. He didn't say, I would rape this bitch. He is a convicted rapist. So, to me, if your executive team can be MAGA hat wearing, Obama birthers, if Jericho can tweet, all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter tweets, if Tony and his dad can be Trump supporters and donate money to the cause, to the re-election, and if you can bring in Mike Tyson, who I've got nothing against it, I'm just saying for the people who are judging the company for what they do politically, if you can bring in a convicted rapist and do a high-profile angle, then what's wrong with bringing in Jim Cornette? That's all I'm saying. One of the greatest managers in the history of wrestling, one of the greatest talkers in the history of the business, and a guy who could bring some reality and some legitimacy in some ways to AEW that it's in a way missing. With what could be some of the most real feeling promos and angles that the company has had to date. I don't see an issue with that. You may disagree. You may agree. Either way, you can let me know. bshowbrian@gmail.com. You can drop me a note at Twitter or on Instagram at bshowbrian. Or you can discuss on Facebook at Wrestling Reanimated. I'd say that about does it this week. Do you want to see Jim Cornette in AEW? Do you think it's a big issue? I really don't. Not with, and again, not to beat a dead horse, but if they can use the people they use in high positions and still pretend they're a progressive company, then I don't see why they couldn't bring in Jim Cornette. Because to me, actions speak louder than words anyway. And I'll leave it at that. My name is Brian J. Thank you for checking out Wrestling Reanimated. Wherever you listen, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, please leave us a rating if you can. It helps us garner more attention and reach more listener ears. So hopefully, if we do that, we can do some more fun stuff with the podcast. And if you're not into leaving reviews and stuff, if you like the podcast and you like this idea, then either shoot me a note with recommendations or your own ideas, and I'll share them. Or in the least, just tell someone else that you think would like this podcast about us. We'd appreciate it. My name's Brian J. This is Wrestling Reanimated.